I love anime. I know, huge surprise. But anime is probably my favorite medium of art because of just how few boundaries there are. I mean, the same medium can have things like One Punch Man to shows like Land of the Lustrous. It's a very diverse medium. However, with such diversity, that doesn't exactly stop the creation of tropes. I mean, just look at the isekai genre as a whole right now. And I personally think one of the worst tropes comes from a specific type of character: the genius. There's nothing that quite bugs me more than recycled characters in anime, and I think one of my most hated recycled characters is the genius. I was admittedly cool with it for a bit when Death Note popularized the concept, but since then it's just gone downhill. Genius characters are often bad, predictable, boring exposition tools that are there strictly to ex machina their way out of every situation, which is dumb, and the perfect reason to make this video on Senku, the first good genius character I've seen in what seems like forever. So let's start with Senku's origin story. He had an interest in the sciences from a young age, and his parents saw that and did whatever they could to help him learn more and more, which is surprisingly realistic? I don't know, maybe it's just me, but most protagonist genius characters are that way out of spite for their family, not love. Not to mention, good, healthy parenting that pushes their children often creates smart children. So after that, we all know about how the world is turned to stone, and Senku manages to escape after a couple hundred years, and begins his goal to bring humans back to the space age. However, Senku quickly learns the hard way that this feat of his is insanely difficult to do, especially alone. He begins to understand just how unforgiving nature is. The show strikes this wonderful balance of the powers of science versus the cruelty of nature. Despite being a genius, Senku struggles to make serious progress on his ambitions. He quickly comes to understand the power of working with other humans to hunt and to gather, to cover all of the necessities, so he can then focus on pushing forward with science. The next point I want to talk about is the term genius and what that really is. Because unlike many other anime genius characters, Senku makes mistakes, and like a lot of them. Sure, he pulls off his occasional ex machina, but you often see him underestimating how much help he will need or how many attempts something will take. I personally love this feature about him. Senku is very much a human, and you can see this not only in his actions, but also how he makes mistakes. It makes him a much more relatable and realistic character who isn't akin to a god, which is probably my biggest pet peeve with most genius characters. They are made out to be these godlike characters who can solve literally any problem with a simple deduction, and that's absolutely not how it works in the real world. Speaking of realistic attributes that Senku has, let's talk about probably the most important one, that being his ability to communicate. Senku is probably one of the only genius characters in anime who isn't socially inept. As a matter of fact, I would actually call Senku charismatic. He is extremely upbeat and is able to quickly understand other people, which is very important to their stone world. After all, the first major step to advancing science is to build a society where people can trust and depend on each other, and that is exactly what Senku is doing. He is literally building the nation of science with the one goal of advancing science to and then past its former glory. In order to do so, Senku has to make friends and allies to slowly build up his nation, leading me to a very unique social trait that Senku has, that being his overall morals. Now, I know I keep complaining about the problem with classic genius characters, but this is usually a trait I'm okay with them having. That being this thought process of always making the rational decision, even if that decision is morally gray. I mean, at the end of the day, it does make sense. A character who is always looking for the most logical next step and has a brain completely built with logic is usually characterized to only think that way. But Senku is different. Senku has objectively good morals. He believes in trying to save everyone and will often make less than optimal decisions for the sake of being good-spirited. He rescues Yuzahara despite it giving them a huge weakness in their fight against Tsukasa. He gives Tsukasa the recipe to revive others despite knowing what Tsukasa is planning on doing. And instead of fear-mongering the locals at the village into helping him, he makes them all ramen and has them pay back their debt. Senku is just genuinely a good guy. He's the kind of character you can easily get behind, despite his decisions sometimes causing him a lot of trouble. He's a protagonist with a good childhood, raised with good morals, family, and friends, and now he's doing the best he can to make the world a better and safer place without sacrificing anyone else. Senku is my favorite genius character because he breaks all of the conventional molds of what it means to be this kind of character. Senku is realistic, relatable, and fun, but at the end of the day, he's still a genius. Thank you guys so much for watching, and a huge thank you to my patrons. You guys are my heroes. Speaking of which, if you want to join me in our editing live streams, jump into our exclusive Discord, or simply support the channel, feel free to join me on Patreon. Make sure you guys share, like, comment, and subscribe. This is Manime Matt. Make sure you guys say man and go watch that goddamned anime.